Good evening, and this is a new Daily Debate episode, and just back from the holy month of Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr and all the festivities that occurred during the past period, with lots and lots of developments worldwide and regional, of course, distraction and some of the regional development that have occurred that has emphasized its reflection on the whole world. Also, there are lots and lots of international developments that has also reflected on the world economy. Today we'll be speaking of how Egypt has been putting some measures in order to be able to avoid the economic repercussions on the country. And just lately, the latest of the president's orders and measures that were taken, the president ordered increasing social protection budget to £529.7. The Egyptian has increased the social protection, marking a 48.8% increase to ease the burdens resulting from the current global inflation. But also, as the country has been putting the citizens as a priority file. We'll be speaking today about the social protection, we'll be speaking about the presidential initiatives, we'll be speaking about how the umbrella of those social protection and the presidential initiatives have been carried out during the past period. What were the reflection on the Egyptian citizen, and more in our episode tonight. Before we delve into our discussion, let me first take the first top story or the top story of the day. And President Abdel al-Sisi held talks with visiting Austrian Chancellor called Neymar at the Al-Ittihadiyya Palace on Thursday. The talks tackled a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern, including the current situation in Sudan, Libya, occupied Palestinian territories, Ethiopia Dam, and the Russian-Ukraine war, as well as Egypt's efforts in the human rights file, in addition to mechanisms of facing illegal immigration during the coming period. They also probed bilateral ties and ongoing consultations between the two countries to deal with unprecedented challenges facing the world's community. In a joint at a joint press conference following the talks, President Sisi welcomed the Austrian Chancellor for his first formal visit to Egypt and extended appreciation for his invitation for him to visit Austria soon. The head of state hailed the distinguished ties that bind the two nations, which he said were formed on mutual respect and sincere friendship, as well as a joint aim to broaden political, economic and cultural ties. The President described the talks as fruitful and constructive and are reflecting the two countries' keenness to deepen bilateral partnership in various domains, as well as strengthening cooperation in many fields, coming on top of which were transportation, manufacture and renewable energy, with the aim of achieving a tangible increase in the trade exchange between the two countries and attracting more Austrian investments to Egypt, which is considered one of Austria's partners at the trade and investment levels in the Middle East and Africa. Meanwhile, the President said they reviewed Egypt's success as people and leadership in combating terrorism and extremism during the past few years through many sacrifices and a comprehensive vision that covered all dimensions of this hatred phenomenon. He called for more cooperation and consultations in the coming stage with the aim of achieving prosperity and progress for the two nations. The two sides agreed to promote relations with the aim of reflecting the distinguished political ties binding the two nations. Right, welcome back, and back to our topic tonight. And before we delve into our discussion, let's first have this quick report. And President Sisi orders increasing social protection budget to £529.7 billion. Let's watch and we'll come back.
President Abdel al-Sisi has announced on Thursday the raising of the minimum wage for government employees to 3,500 Egyptian pounds and pensions by 15% as part of a wide-ranging social package to alleviate ramifications of global economic situation on the public starting the 1st of April. The President also ordered raising the minimum wage for those government employees who hold a master's degree to be 6,000 Egyptian pounds and for those who hold a PhD to 7,000 Egyptian pounds. The minimum wage for government employees was last raised in October 2022 from 2,700 Egyptian pounds to 3,000 Egyptian pounds. President el-Sisi also announced raising tax exemptions from 24,000 Egyptian pounds to 30,000 Egyptian pounds annually, starting the 1st of April. He also announced raising Takaful and Karama benefits for the neediest citizens by 25%, effective starting the 1st of April. During an event in Minya to honor the outstanding Egyptians as part of his tour of decent life projects in the Upper Egypt Governorate, President el-Sisi said the social package is meant to alleviate the ramifications of the global economic circumstances. He noted that the economic reform program that the government started to implement since 2016 has cushioned the economy against some of the impacts of the Russia-Ukraine war and the coronavirus pandemic before that. The President said that the Russian-Ukrainian war, which erupted over a year ago, has had double the impact on the global economy, which had not yet recovered from similar effects caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Egypt, like other countries, was impacted by the rise in the energy and food prices and the disruption of global supply chains as a result of the war, he added. The President stressed, however, that the economic reforms implemented by the state since 2016 and the steps of the state took to maximize its assets and develop the infrastructure and the social protection schemes have all contributed significantly to cushioning the blow of the global crisis on the country. He said that the state has also developed its economic plan to localize industries, reduce the import gap, expand self-sufficiency in food, and shift to attract foreign investments.
Right, welcome back and ahead with our episode tonight. And let me here welcome our guest, Dr. Hisham Salam, Economic Development Advisor. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're speaking today about a very interesting and important file that the government has been putting as a prior file, particularly during the past few years and after the global developments that we are seeing. Egypt has kind of adopted a new socio-economic package, and these were definitely upon the directives of the president, and the leadership is following up with it. Let me know your reading to such a socio-economic package or a socio-economic program and plan put by the government.
So, I think the most important observation in the Egyptian government welfare programs and social network programs is how strategic and proactive those plans were. What I'm trying to say is it is not a product of a crisis. It's an existing program that's been going on for a while, and the thrust of the program was accelerated because of the current events. So the agility of the programs is quite impressive. Usually, let's take a case of a natural disaster. There is a certain level of readiness. If you don't have it, your casualties will be quite substantial. But we had existing programs that, as a result of the the sequence of terrible events that took place around the world accelerated the rate of challenges that came into the economy. And because we had existing strategies and programs that protect the more affected or not fragile, what I'm trying to say is the most, let's call it the unfortunate segment of the population. Vulnerable is the word I've been looking for. The most vulnerable social category. We had existing ones. We responded faster and much more effective, and we had the tools.
So just to understand what you're speaking about, that we already had been putting a socio-economic program even before the crisis emerged, the crises worldwide emerged,
Sure.
which gave us a life breakthrough through such crises, right?
True, and that puts Egypt at a different category from many countries around the world. I'll give you an example. The coronavirus 2.5 years crisis. If you compare with a lot of objectiveness and fairness what happened in a place like USA, the world's 25% of the world economy, and what happened in Egypt. People lost their houses because they couldn't pay the mortgages, because their companies didn't have money to pay them, and so on and so forth. The response in Egypt, because we are quite agile in that space, and our system is existing and powerful, we did not see that. We had the same. In US, probably the healthcare system is much more sophisticated than Egypt. But if you compare the casualties and the aftermath, we've done very well. Socially and economically, we came out almost, we did 5% GDP growth while the whole world went into recession during the coronavirus. Nobody has put that in an analysis where, how did you do that? A lot of the foreign media have looked at the, but individuals usually look at the last 3 weeks. But as an analyst, it's obvious that Egypt has the discipline that can deal with such. So you're absolutely right in what you said. We had existing plans and strategies. All we had to do is to accelerate it, increase, like His Excellency the President said, triple as you just said in the news. But it's an existing system. It's not a matter of injecting money into the problem. If you have the money and you don't have the system, it doesn't make any difference. If you have the discipline and the system and the tools and the people to execute this, all you have to do is just increase the funding. And that's what we have.
So let's take it from the very beginning, and we'll not start with the orders, the new orders of the President to increase the social protection budget, because this is for the first time, I guess, in the history of Egypt, that the social protection has been increased to 48, almost 50% of the social. But let me start from the very beginning. And from the very beginning, the leadership, along with the government, has adopted a very harsh economic reform program, in which it was inevitable to carry out with it. But at the same time, it has also put this social protection umbrella in order to protect people from the repercussions of such a program. Right. If I may ask you here, how was the leadership and the government able to make such a balance? Because we're speaking about very hard situations that Egypt has been put in, and that the reform or the economic reform program was very harsh and challenging. So how was the government able to make such a balance in order to be able to give the citizen a life breath so he can manage with his life up till today?
Mona, let's keep in mind something quite obvious, but we sometimes miss it. How many refugees and people from other countries come to Egypt for a social and a life that will save them from their own challenges? A lot.
Challenges, death.
Well,
situation?
let's talk about disasters
but that
Egypt,
is not. That is
no.
not.
What I'm trying to say
speaking
is
about the common citizen, right?
No. I understand. What I'm trying to say is, we do not have. You spoke about the harsh economic reform programs. Okay, it's a simple word. There are priorities. Okay.
No, I'm speaking about the balance that the leadership has been able to make in putting such a harsh reform program, and at the same time help people, particularly the most needy, to avert or overcome the burden or the hardship of such a program.
Very simply, because it's a priority. You have to balance those two, because protecting the most vulnerable communities of your population is a top one priority. It's a priority A+ or A1. The economic reform program, you can slow it down or increase it or find solutions around it much easier than dealing with it. It is not a negotiable. It's not a negotiable solution in terms of protecting the most vulnerable. That is something. Let's talk. I mean, I always make this analogy. A family, with the head of the family and the executive team of the family, which is, let's say, father, mother, and brothers and sisters and children. And then the younger ones, who are the most vulnerable. So who's the priority in all this?
The children, the base.
The most vulnerable. They become the priority of the parents, the brothers, sisters, and so on. That's exactly what's happening in Egypt. And even in Egypt is even much more than this, because our culture, as a social culture, is built on a very unique system of community support. Even at the basic levels, we support each other. Maybe we do it naturally, so we don't notice it. But I have friends who are foreigners, and they come to visit, and they're impressed.
The warmth of Egyptians and their kindness and hospitality is.
So we do it on a population level. So what about the government? I mean, that's so obvious. They do this because it's a priority. How they do it, as I said, they have the tools, they have the strategies, they have the know-how, they have everything. So they do. They do it quickly. Do they move funds from here to there? Any government will do that all the time. Priority sectors, they change all the time. Economic priorities change all the time. Political priorities change all the time. Opportunities change all the time. And challenges change all the time. So in terms of, it's a matter of prioritizing your focus and your input into the population.
So we're having different kind of social protection. In terms of, for an instance, the president has here ordered the increase of social protection budget, which is money, very much money allocated to people's services in all
programs. Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, there were other initiatives with the same aim of social protection, but in other way. For instance, تكافل وكرامة. For instance, حياة كريمة, or a decent life. For instance, health initiatives. How do you view all those initiatives that were made, and how were they support for the government's plans with its vision and particularly what it aims for a resilient economy.
Okay. I'll go back to your previous question, which is how you balance your priorities between the economic reform and the social welfare or the social protection network. Actually, if you protect the most vulnerable population, you're actually helping with your economic reform, because you're enabling quite a number of segments of your community or your population to become more productive and to be protected from poverty and so on. So you're adding to your economic reform, you're adding power, you're adding resources, you're adding. So those who, let's say, didn't have a job, they have a job, they contribute to the economy. Those who had debts and the government helped them with their debts and so on. Those who are in takaful wa karama or life with dignity, haya karima, without
Decent life.
Decent life.
Solidarity and dignity.
Solidarity
and
and
takaful and
takaful, yes, exactly. Well, the translation usually goes. So anyway, those programs have given a safety net for segments of the population that will become major contributors. Because why? Because these large numbers. You're talking about around, I think, 50 million or more or less that are taking advantage of all various
58,
programs.
58, almost 60 million
from
people.
all programs.
No,
taking
just
care.
from Decent Life.
Is it Decent Life only? Okay. 2 January 2019, when Decent Life was launched, it's the largest social welfare system in the world.
Yes, indeed.
By size, by fund size, and by population in the world.
Those who are benefiting from it
Absolutely.
at large. Yes.
So back to your question, the outcome is not just, of course, it's a priority to keep the most vulnerable segments from falling into extreme poverty, but the outcome will feed quite well into the economic reform. So the benefit is dual benefit. Yeah, I think I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, in a way, but we're getting into into more. But before we delve more into our discussion and before we continue on, just few weeks ago, the president has raised minimum wages for government employees to 3,500 and pensions by 15% as of the 1st April, and we have already seen that. Before we continue on with our discussion, let's have this report and we'll come back.
President Abdel al-Sisi has ordered an almost 50% increase in appropriation for various subsidy and social protection programs in the budget for the fiscal year 2023-2024 in order to ease the burden on citizens during the global inflation wave. Minister of Finance Mohammed Maid said the budget for subsidy and social protection network would increase from 358.4 billion Egyptian pound in fiscal year 2022-2023 to 529.7 billion Egyptian pound in fiscal year 2023-2024, an increase of 48.8%. Maid added, this increase will allow the state to expand the social protection network for the most vulnerable families as part of overall efforts to improve standards of living. The finance minister explained that 127.7 billion Egyptian pound have been allocated in the new budget to subsidize food commodities, a 41.9% increase over the 90 billion Egyptian pound figure in the current fiscal year. He said that 119.4 billion Egyptian pound have been allocated to subsidize petroleum products. He added that 6 billion Egyptian pounds have been allocated for health insurance and medicines, a 58.2% increase over figures in the current fiscal year. 10.2 billion Egyptian pounds have been allocated for subsidized housing, a 31.5% increase over figures in the current fiscal year. 31 billion Egyptian pound have been allocated for social security pension, 25% increase over figures in the current fiscal year, Might said. Additional 202 billion Egyptian pound have been allocated for pension fund contributions, an increase of 6% over the 191 billion Egyptian pound figure in the current fiscal year, which will guarantee financial liquidity necessary to serve pensioners, beneficiaries and the insured. In addition, the state has earmarked 8 billion Egyptian pound to cover the cost of medical treatments to citizens, with an annual growth rate of 14.3%. Might also stressed that the state is forging ahead with efforts to complete the first phase of the Decent Life presidential initiative to develop the countryside. Moreover, the finance minister said that the government is taking necessary measures to support the agricultural and industrial productive sectors, allocating 19.5 billion Egyptian pound to support credit facilities for owners of industrial and agricultural projects to stimulate expansion of production. Additionally, 28.1 billion Egyptian pound have been earmarked in the budget of the next fiscal year under the Export Support Program to support exports, an increase of 368.3% over the 6 billion Egyptian pound in the current budget.
Right, welcome back, and indeed, the announcement of a new republic. And part of announcing the new republic was leaving no one behind, or that was the slogan of the new republic, which has been adopted by the government through the different programs that have been put.
Sure.
But what was that about? It was horizontal, no, vertical, horizontal, and across Egypt, and for different categories and different programs. Mm-hmm. Can you just explain and how the package differs to add the expansion of the base of beneficiaries of program from the social protection umbrella, mm-hmm. not in Cairo, not in Alexandria, no, we're speaking across the governorates of Egypt?
Sure. This strategic approach that was adapted to design those programs have taken into consideration the actual challenges themselves. So whether it's a location, a certain location in the Republic of Egypt, or a specific challenge, let's say healthcare. So healthcare insurance, the national umbrella of healthcare insurance have been established, and it's now being rolled out in most all governorates. But also, even within that initiative, there was certain initiatives or programs aiming at women, for example, and then others aiming at specific diseases like diabetes and so on, to protect
100 million health
exactly.
initiative.
Yeah, and even
initiative.
within that, there are certain areas and certain specific categories of population, and let's say men or women and so on, that have their own programs, whether it's vaccination or
we eradicated, for an instant, the virus C.
That's one, yeah. So back to the general aspect. So healthcare, food. There's been, especially in the latest crisis with Ukraine, and even before that, the supply chain issues after Corona, where the pricing have been. So it's not just Ukraine. It's even before that we had Corona, and then supply chain clog around the world, and then Ukraine war. So it's a sequence that have made food prices quite a challenge.
What I was speaking about where the social protection programs.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke about the health one,
Mm-hmm.
but actually health one became part and partial of, for an instant, decent life. Decent life started with housing units and trying to give a decent life to citizens by putting them in better houses. And then it extended, for an instant.
Mm-hmm.
It extended to other services,
Yeah.
education, health, and all this. For instance, Takaful and Karama, it started with pensions,
Yeah.
and then it extended to give some support to most needy people.
Sure.
This is what I'm speaking about. So from your point of view, how expanding such an umbrella, as I said, vertically and horizontally, and across the government rates, how did that add to the expansion of the base of beneficiaries of the programs, and how did that reflect on us as a country that wants a resilient economy?
Sure. True. Simply because it's a needs basis. It's a need basis. So as the needs change, your program changes. As the need increases, your program adds up to its details, and so on. Again, as I said initially, it's a very strategic program and it's very agile. So you mentioned the expansion of programs and the expansion of the population that takes advantage of the programs. And that's what I meant about quick response and designing the programs that lead into the economic impact of the overall economy. Egypt is
What does increasing social protection by 48.8%? What does this mean? What does this mean also for the budget of the country?
Okay. Extending the programs by such percentage, which is quite a lot, it means that the challenge is at a point where you need to increase the effort and increase the amount of funding that you need to apply into the problem. But also, it's probably, I think, it's a positive aspect of the overall outcome. Eventually, if you're supporting the most vulnerable segments of the population, what you need is covering the needs that you mentioned earlier: food, housing, healthcare, education, the basic needs. As the economic crisis around the world is diversifying, so we did not have challenges with food as we had after the war, the Russian war, Ukrainian war. So the needs change. You have to increase you cannot cut from your existing programs to divert into new programs. You have to increase the overall budget to be able to cover the existing and the new challenges that you're having.
That is a very important point. You just pointed your finger on a very important issue: existing and coming challenges. From your point of view, we have a very, very successful protection program. How, from your point of view, should we develop such social protection programs in order to be able to meet people's needs at large? Because definitely we have different segments, categories of people on the ground, and each one has his own needs. So from your point of view, how to develop such social protection programs to satisfy the different needs?
I think probably you have three ways of keeping the thrust of those programs and keeping and increasing the effectiveness. Outreach, so you need to reach more of the vulnerable population segments. You have to reach out, one, and that would come from the second suggestion, which is the awareness. Most of the time, the awareness of such programs is limited to certain population that has access to information that is being distributed. The vulnerable segments of population do not have this access, and if they have it, they probably cannot digest it as such. So you might be eligible for a program, but you don't know. So the outreach and the awareness of the program, and obviously the funding. As the need increases, you will need to execute better. So the quality has to keep getting better.
No, just a minute. So outreaching to people, so
More
they would
people.
understand what they are eligible for?
No, outreaching in terms of numbers.
In terms of numbers?
So
so they would be aware of
okay.
the rights,
you
or
reach
what?
them, more people. Okay, so there are certain, let's say, remote villages or whatever that probably not covered. So you need to go further, expand the outreach. Then the awareness, the media and the awareness, it has to educate those vulnerable segments, people who are eligible for those services, that you are eligible, you have access to this, and this is how you do it. And don't leave it to YouTube, because quite a lot of programs, people
Social media.
who are not, no, YouTube in particular, you'll find certain individuals who come out and explain how to apply for Takaful and Karama. Why would you do that? It should be the official channels that go out and say, how do you use it? And probably it's great to have it on a website, but certain, reaching out to those categories of people who are eligible must be done in their own way. Let's take an example of commercials and ads on TV that addresses certain healthcare issues. Like Bilharsia in the previous, or family planning. If you can't afford to have 10 children, you should have 2 children. Those campaigns were addressing the population in a very specific way, so they could understand the messaging process has to fit the audience. So a lot of people don't understand how it works. What kind of documentation is needed? Who should I speak to? And then you leave it to people telling each other. Those individuals.
So well information given to people in very specific way.
In a suitable way, a language and a communication channel that they have access to.
I guess the social protection issue needs more and more of episodes to be spoken about. But my time is out and I have to end it here. So
Thank you.
Dr. Hisham Salam, Economic Development Advisor, we thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Pleasure.
Our pleasure. I guess that takes us to the end of this episode. Next debate will be on Sunday. So until then, it's good night.